Did you have a nice break? The cookies were good. Yes, very good. I love ginger. All right, so discipline. So this is one that always gets kind of a funny reaction because people think of, discipline, like bad girl, bad boy, and when they were kids. And then that's one thing. Then the other thing they sometimes think about is like military discipline and thinking that it's going to be too rigid and too strict and all that. And so, I work a lot with organizations developing standard work. And standard work in the service and knowledge work arena, an office, is sometimes tricky because they're not used to this. And yet, we successfully get standard work in place all the time. And so what I often will help people see is that the more disciplined you are, the more flexible you are. Because if you've got a very, very clearly defined foundation, you can move quickly. If you don't have any standardization to how things are done, it's very difficult to turn. And, it's like, a cruise ship takes a long time to turn. If they don't have standard work, organizations go the same way, very slow. And a little tiny boat can zip, zip, zip. That's what you want to be able to do. And you can do that better with standard work in place. So one of the things that people ask is, well, what does it take to have discipline? And this was an interesting piece I found in Tony Schwartz and Jim Lohr have a book called The Power of Full Engagement. Tony's more recent book is called Be Excellent at Anything. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. He's a great writer. And they were discovering that businesses, by and large, don't practice. They just do all the time, so they're always on. And when you look at athletes, they train literally 90% of the total time. They're practicing and training for only 10% performance. Whereas businesses maybe do 1% training and practice for 99% performance. Something's not good with that. We need practice. So the question then people ask is, well, what do you need to practice? Well, there's a lot of things you need to practice, but the biggest thing to practice is problem-solving skills. And practicing PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, Plan, Do, Study, Adjust, whichever one you use, that is what practice is in the business that wants to be outstanding. So Plan, Do, Study, Adjust is what I prefer over Plan, Do, Check, Act. And in the book, I have a little sidebar that explains why. But just a short story is that W. Edwards Deming, the PDCA cycle is what is often known as the Deming cycle. It was not. It was a misinterpretation by a Japanese businessman who thought that the U.S. translation, the American translation, was Plan, Do, Check, Act. And so that's how we got Plan, Do, Check, Act. Study, Adjust, you've already learned I like words. It's linguistically more accurate. To study and adjust is really much closer to what you should be doing than checking and acting, which is kind of confusing. And so Plan, Do, Study, Adjust is what I use. What I want to also suggest is that getting people to understand that this is an experiment is very important. A lot of leaders think that you have to know exactly what the outcome is going to be, and you need to help them understand that nothing is that certain. It's all a big experiment, a well thought out experiment, but nevertheless an experiment. So when you're planning, you're really developing a hypothesis. I think this is the problem. I think this is going to fix it. I think. And then you go through and you conduct an experiment where you're in the do phase. And then you're studying your results. You're measuring the results and studying them to see whether or not your hypothesis was proven or disproven. And then you're making adjustments based on that revelation and that knowledge, and you're standardizing and then stabilizing your improvement. Most people don't intuitively follow this kind of thinking. And most people in particular don't take the thorough time up here in the plan stage to do a thorough job, including root cause analysis, as we talked about earlier. So what I like to suggest is that when you're helping people learn this scientific methodology, they need to understand that the plan phase should actually take up 50, more, sometimes less, but more or less 50 to sometimes even 80% of the total time, which gets back to that quote that you saw with Einstein and how he said, only 1 minute to solve the problem once you have 59 minutes of planning in place. Now, the trick is not getting into analysis paralysis. So when you get too into like, I need to know more, I need to know more, and that's the thing that I think is a bit of a push-pull between the Lean and the Six Sigma community, is a little bit of the, how much data do you need to make a well-thought-out decision and move forward? And so, really, it's minimum data to make the absolute right decision and nothing more. Why collect more if you can make the decision with less? So it's a balance between those two. You don't want to do analysis paralysis, but you want to take a thoughtful look at what the real problem is and what the root cause is before you move forward. So how do you practice this, and what is it going to take? Well, so one of your own, Kay Anders Erickson, is a wonderful researcher. He's now at Florida State University in the U.S. He's from Sweden. He's from Stockholm. How many know of him? Have you heard of him? Oh, he's a brilliant man. You have to know about him. Brilliant man. He discovered that excellence of any sort takes almost exactly 10,000 hours to achieve absolute mastery at something. Whether it's actors, swimmers, shooters, business people, gymnasts, singers, did I say singers? Anyone, it takes that amount of time, which is about 10 years of pretty significant practice. So it's a really long haul to become a master. Now, not everyone's suited to be a master. Not every company is suited to be outstanding, frankly. I wish that, but I don't think every company will do what it takes to become outstanding, and maybe even wants to become outstanding. But this stair-step approach is my experience I have a master's degree in adult learning, so that's part of where this comes from, and a lot of it's experience, just practical in the streets experience with what it takes for someone to become a master. And it is that they start with general awareness, and then you move up this stair-step to mastery. Now, you notice I have learn, do, coach here. I'm not suggesting that you have to become a master before you can start coaching. But I am suggesting that you wouldn't want to start coaching down here. So this is one thing I see happening that's not so good in the Lean community, is people are now understanding, we need a coach. We need a coach to coach us. And then the people that are coaching aren't proficient enough in even the basic tools and the philosophy and principles of Lean to be an effective coach. So it takes moving up at least to this, area in the middle here to become proficient enough and knowledgeable enough to become a good coach and then to coach others. But really, our jobs are to coach. I mean, that is everyone's job in this room. I don't care whether you're an improvement professional full-time, a consultant, a leader in an organization, an up-and-coming person in an organization, wherever you are, our job is to coach. That's what life is teaching others. And so what I see happening also is a lot of people get into a classroom setting to learn Lean, principles and tools and things like that, and then they never go out to apply with a coach at their side. And you can get great understanding and awareness in a classroom setting, but you can't really develop skills in a classroom. Like maybe this much, but that's it. You have to be applying it out there. So when it comes to this discipline, PDCA, PDSA, and learning that, it has to be something that's coached. So who should coach? I would like to propose to you that every single manager, every single leader in the organization ultimately needs to be a coach, which means that every single manager and every single leader needs to be highly proficient in PDSA. Which means that we have to get that thinking and that scientific methodology in place across an entire organization. Now, where do you start? I would recommend, if you're in a huge company, you start at the manager level. If you're in a small company, try to start at the top. So I always say, aim for as high as you can and accept as low as you have to. It'd be great to start at the top and trickle this knowledge down, but that's just not always realistic. So you start where you can. So the ways to practice PDSA and to get everyone really well skilled with this Or again, we have the tools already. We just have to use them in the right way. So there's a macro PDSA cycle out here. And then there's a middle one, and then there's a smaller one, and there's actually a smaller one and a smaller one and a smaller one that I couldn't fit. And so you have these nested PDSA cycles, or these fractals. I don't know if you're familiar with fractals, where you cut something apart and each piece is exactly the same structure as the larger piece. That's exactly what you have with improvement. And so strategy deployment, what we saw in the last section, the X matrix or a modified version, that becomes your macro PDSA cycle for the entire year. What are you going to work on? And then the middle one would be, you may decide that you need to improve a value stream. And value stream mapping could become the middle PDSA cycle. And it is for a lot of my clients, that is the middle PDSA cycle of improving the value stream. And how do you improve the value stream? Well, you need to go to the next level, which is either daily improvement or rapid improvement events, also known as Kaizen events or Kaizen blitzes if you speak Japanese. They're rapid sequestered teams where you make rapid improvement, and just traditional projects. Some improvement needs to be done by a traditional project, well-managed project. So you have these different cycles, and then even within the small one, there's even a smaller PDSA cycle when you're actually developing the improvement, testing it, and implementing it. So all of these things that we've got will help develop it. I think it's best to start with an awareness session so people understand what it is and why it's important and understand the terminology, and then move to doing and start practicing PDSA in everything you do. And A3, I have up here, I forgot to mention that. So A3 management is also, if it's a big enough problem, it also can be a macro PDSA cycle that you then work through the current state and get into countermeasures, which get more and more tiny as time goes on, the cycles. So hopefully that makes sense to quite a few of you, that you have these nested PDSA cycles, that is your practice. That is practicing the scientific methodology across the organization. So the other thing I'd like to suggest, remember back in the beginning I was talking about how you can't operate an organization without your processes all well defined and with key performance indicators and someone who's managing those and all of that. You have to have that. So this happens to be a swim lane style process map. So each lane is for one functional area. It is a metrics-based map in that there's a ticking clock along the bottom, just like a value stream map. But it's down to the micro details. It's not at the value stream level. It's down into the nitty-gritty step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and how long should those steps take, and what is the expected quality of the information being passed through the process. So, I recommend you do some sort of process documentation, if not this, then something else, for every single key process. That is the discipline of the organization, to have that documented and managed actively. So documenting it and putting it in a shared drive or in a 3-ring binder if you're still in paper, that doesn't work. It needs to be something that you're managing on a regular basis and is being improved on a regular basis. So this is the other thing, is I see improvement being done maybe once a year for a process, maybe once a decade, frankly. But it needs to be part of the work. So instead of improvement being something we do separate from work, it needs to become part of the work. So that when we're working, we're both working in the business and we're also working on the business at the same time. So now, who's going to do this? Who's going to manage all this? You need a process owner. You need one person who's managing the process and is the person who's driving continuous improvement. Because improving a process once a year or once a decade is not continuous improvement. That's regular improvement, but it's not continuous. And conditions change far too quickly to have processes not being looked at on an extremely regular basis. So the cycle needs to be a continuous cycle, and the process owner becomes a bit like a doctor. Just think about a doctor. When you go in, you've got some symptoms, and your temperature's up. So your key performance indicator is, I don't know it in centigrade. What's normal temperature in centigrade? 37? Okay, I should know that. I do know that, actually. I just couldn't recall it. Although it has been tricky in my room trying to figure out the temperature. But so 37 is the norm, right? That's your target condition. Okay, now all of a sudden it goes up to 39, 30, 40, what would be death? What? 42, okay, we won't go beyond that. So, it's going up, and so now you need to go to the doctor to get adjusted. Figure out root cause analysis, what's wrong, and then countermeasure, medication, rest, water, whatever it is. And that is a PDSA cycle. So the process owner is someone who's doing that same thing for every key process. Not every single process, but every key process. You define what those are. And so this process owner is not someone who's an improvement professional, like a full-time improvement professional. They are the manager over the main part of that process. They are the people that are overseeing it. So what does that mean? Well, that means we've got to train our managers to actually be process improvement professionals. So what does that mean? That means that Karen Martin has an idea here that we've been doing things all wrong for a long time. That we have viewed managers as people who manage people versus people who manage processes. And my belief is if you manage processes, the need to manage people melts away. In other words, the reality is you can't manage people. You can lead people. You can lead them to greater things. You can't manage people. You can manage products. You can manage projects, and you can manage processes, the 3 Ps. Projects, products, and processes. That's all you can manage. You can't manage people. So I believe we've had it all wrong for decades and decades and decades, and that the managers need to be taught basic process improvement skills. How do you map? What metrics are relevant? What are the basic root cause analysis tools? Do we need a trend chart on this or not? Do we need to have a histogram to track performance or not? What do we need to track performance? And then they have to be given the authority to put together a cross-functional team of people to make improvement, even if they don't have direct line authority for those people on an organization chart. So, if I'm a manager and I've got people reporting to me, if there's a process problem, it's probably going to be different departments that are involved in that process. So I'm going to have the authority to get people from all those departments together, bless you, and get them so that they're able to come together and make improvement. It's pretty out there thinking, but it really is where we have to go. It has not worked for decades the way we've been doing it, and decades and decades and decades. So the process owner has to be, in my opinion, manager or below. This is not a VP having responsibility for performance. This is someone close to the work who is seeing performance and managing the performance on a day-to-day basis. So we have a phrase, I'm not sure if you have this in Sweden, called minding the store. So it's like the shopkeeper is always watching the store to make sure that the money's right in the cash register and no one's coming in and walking off with product and all that stuff. Minding the store, minding the store is the phrase for making sure you're watching what's really going on all the time. A manager, anyone above a manager, they don't have the time, and their breadth and their scope of view is too big to be an effective process manager. They could be a value stream manager, but not a process manager. We're talking down to where the work's being done. It should not be a third party. It should not be delegated. It should be to a manager who's actively working in the work. They are responsible for overall performance of that process, so the 2 to 5 key performance indicators that you put in place for every key process, that's what they're managing, and they're pulling together teams to either solve a problem, take corrective action if the trend goes in the wrong direction, whether up or down, or if it's consistently performing, time to raise the bar and get more improvement in place. So that's that person's responsibility. And if you play around with this, experiment with it, try it in one area. give one person that authority and try it, you're going to find it is wildly effective. So I've only had probably 5 clients really take this on in earnest. You know, a couple of them have tried it and they talk it, but they just can't handle that org chart thing, you know, bucking the org chart. But the ones that are doing it are having wild success. They're performing at levels they've never performed before, ever, because there's one person watching the whole process. The other thing is that they do need to be able to go outside of boundaries, and you know, I don't really care about org charts. Well, actually, that's not true. I care about them to understand the relationships when I go into a client. I always want an org chart for that. But once I get in there, what I care about is performance. And I think the company cares about performance. And so if someone's a process owner that doesn't have direct line responsibility, oh well, they're managing the process. So it's a little provocative, and it's probably the thing in my book that I get the most email about is this whole process ownership thing, and people are like, whoa. So the other thing is, you can have a chart that you put together so everyone knows who is the process owner for this process, so they know who to go to. So this is a basic chart that shows different value streams, and then the processes within each value stream. Some of them have a value stream manager and then individual process owners that kind of go up together and meet with the value stream manager to solve problems and raise the bar. And some of them, in this case, there's a value stream manager and there is no process owner, because that value stream doesn't really warrant having an individual process owner. So it just depends on every value stream what you've got. So let's recap. PDSA, learning it in a classroom and then being coached. Processes documented, all with 2 to 5 key performance indicators, and process owners managing that. Those are our beginning steps toward disciplined organization. So let's do this. I know it says 5 and 10. We've been doing 5 and 5. So let's just do another 5-minute breakout. Talk with your neighbors about what you think about this discipline thing. And if you want to challenge, during the question period, if you want to challenge me on this, feel free. Because I think that the dialogue is really important on how do you do this? How do you make this successful in an organization? So 5 minutes to talk, 5 minutes to report out. Ready, set, go. All right, so this may have been the most controversial one, the more difficult one. Let me ask a question. Did any of you talk about discipline in meetings? Did anyone? Because, I've had to, of course, cut context to fit into the time period, but that is also another place where great discipline can go a long way, where where you have standard work basically for meetings. Agendas are always produced in advance. They're always distributed in advance. When you get into the meeting, it's timed. Each item is timed, and there's always someone who's assigned a to-do, and then there's follow-up from that, and there's a very rigid kind of standard way you go about having a meeting. And if the meeting is done early, you get out early and those kinds of things. So that's also a good way. And by the way, one more thing, I've been experimenting with my clients with 45-minute meetings and 45-minute phone calls instead of an hour. It's working brilliantly. It's amazing how much you can get done in 45 minutes that used to fill an hour. So that's just one thing. Okay, so discipline. What kinds of discussions did you have and reactions to the difficulty of possibly building this discipline in an organization? Anyone? How about, did anyone talk about process ownership? Yeah, you did? Did you come up with any ideas, or was it more like, oh, this is going to be hard?
It's more a problem really today. We don't have the solution yet.
Yeah. So you really do have to figure this one out. This is one that it's really impossible to perform well if you don't have someone watching. I mean, there's no other enterprise, there's no other entity, there's no other anything in the world that operates the way businesses do this way. It's just kind of confounding that businesses continue to operate this way. But we have a legacy of behaving this way. So, do you have any questions then on discipline? This one scared you. Any ideas come up that were great ideas to share with the rest of the group that say, hey, you know, we thought about this. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. The way our discussion went was that we were quite familiar with the somewhat negative aspect of discipline, which is following orders, reporting on the right day with the right content, etc. When it comes to the process dimension, it becomes a little bit more blurred. And I think that's where we see some developing potential and a lot more things to be improved, actually. So anything else? What did we talk about, guys? Okay, I guess I summed it up.
Okay, thank you. So something that triggered in my mind is that you're right, that there's that negative view of discipline, and even when it comes to standardizing processes, there's also a view that standardization is bad, you know, that it will take away people's freedom and all that. But what you can do is standardize parts of processes, especially if there's some creativity in the process. You don't want to, I mean, over-standardizing is as bad as under-standardizing. And so, for example, with surgery, every surgery is different, even for the same surgery. Open heart surgery, completely different depending on the patient's age, their pre-existing conditions, you know, their body weight. I mean, everything is different. Yet, standardization is very common for surgery, where, you know, there are points along the way where it's always done the same way, and then there's wiggle room in the middle where you can do whatever you want based on the condition of the patient, etc. So you can do that with engineering, art, like actual creative processes in product development, but yet you can still have these, you know, standardized points along the way that help you move quickly as an organization. So. Yes, sir.
We talked about patients, not the patients, but the patients.
Yes.
In the for the bosses. If you have an example that we had yesterday, we had an education for first-line managers in visualization, and one of the bosses stepped in and showed a thumbs up for one of the middle management, and that was the month's outcome of the economics. And this tells me something, that we have no patience in what we want to see. It's as a marker more than we must react. We don't see the outcome of 1 month as a marker that we can have patience with. Instead, we react at the exact moment at what was happening.
So do you mean when your performance starts dipping, that people like quickly, instead of seeing if it's a real trend or if it's just
you react direct
yeah.
instead of seeing the patience in your activities over time.
Yeah, that is something to ward against, and actually you can standardize the way data is handled also by saying, you know, we're not going to take action unless it's something very risky, you know, like either financial risk or physical harm or regulatory risk. You guys okay? So, you know, if it's that, then you have to take action right away. But if it's not that, then, you know, wait and see for 1 more month to make sure it's really a problem is a good thing. So it is hard to have patience. You know what I thought you were going to say with patience is, I thought you were going to say that you don't have that you have a hard time with patience to do the process mapping and get it documented and all that, because I hear people all the time say, "Oh, we don't have time to do that." And you know what Deming said about that? You know what he said about that? He said, "Oh yeah, but you have plenty of time to do the rework all the time and deal with the chaos and all that. Oh, you find time for that, but you don't have time to sit down and map your processes." You know, so it's an interesting thing. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm curious about what you said about managing people.
Yes.
How do you combine process ownership with people management and also profit and loss responsibility? How does the org chart look?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of the actual people management, you can still have people under you that you're reviewing for you know, job performance and giving bonuses if there are bonuses and things like that. But it's the day-to-day management that kind of melts away, that you don't have to do that if the processes are working well. When people misbehave or act up in business, it's because the processes aren't working well. except for that, remember the one sociopath we talked about? So that could be a problem, and you need to get rid of that person. But most of the time, it's really the processes. So I get teams together all the time, where when we're putting the team together, the person that my contact will say, oh, no, you don't want to put those two together. Not in the same room. And I said, why? The fact that you're saying that, bring it on. I want them in the same room together because they're going to work through their issues in that room. And I don't even have to do anything. As a facilitator, all I have to do is facilitate the process of defining the process, and they work it all out because it's always been and it will always be about processes. We think it's personalities. It's rarely personality. It's almost always systems and processes. And usually when it happens, they become really good friends and it never reverses because they finally have understood each other. They've come together to design something that works well for both of them. And it's shocking how much of the time we think we have people problems when it's really a process problem. Now, one more thing on the org chart. You can still have a process owner that resides wherever they reside now. Don't have to change the org chart. Just give them the authority and let everyone else know that they are the process owner and they've got this level of authority. You don't have to change anything on the org chart. Now, if you've got unions, you have unions, right? It's a little trickier. But for those that aren't unionized, and you have to make sure you work through the union if you have unions. So, did I answer? Is there something lingering? More question? Oh, P&L. I haven't seen P&L change at all, depending on process ownership, because it usually resides higher than where I'm talking about. I'm talking about usually managers. Do your managers have P&L responsibility? Wow, I want to come here. Really, they do. I have not seen that in the U.S., a manager having P&L responsibility. But maybe they're high managers. Oh, profit and loss, I'm sorry. Profit and loss, so financial responsibility. Value stream managers, I have seen that. So they've had profit and loss responsibility, but not at the process level. So I actually don't know how you would handle that. That's a good question. Okay, anything else? All right, let's move on. So now we come to the grand finale, engagement. So I mentioned earlier that if you get great clarity, focus, and discipline in place, you will, by nature, have a higher engaged workforce because the process to implement all of those involves the workforce in a very, very big way. You can't just mandate, we're going to have clarity, and not involve the people who actually do the work. So you're already set up for success when you've done the three before this. Now, are you familiar with W.L. Gore that make Gore-Tex fabric? Do you know Gore-Tex fabric? And it's really wonderful. They have the most fascinating company I've ever studied. They have 9,000 employees globally. They have no bosses. There's no org chart. It's completely flat. They have one of the highest levels of engagement I've ever seen. And Terry, who was someone, he's in the book as well, someone I interviewed for the book, in our interview, which was actually not about this per se, it was actually about how they're structured. And he just came out with this when we were talking. I've become a better person, a better husband, a better friend from working at Gore. And it was like a cannonball hit me in the stomach. I was like, whoa, I've never heard anyone say that. And wouldn't it be unbelievably cool if every single employee said that about their employer? Because again, when you think about this from a society perspective, big picture perspective, people spend incredibly long hours at work. You know, the greatest part of their waking hours are at work, at least 5 days a week. And so wouldn't it be incredible to set up an environment where they're coming home feeling like this, and we're actually developing people. We're making better human beings. Better human beings mean less wars, you know, and all those kinds of things. And so you know, we have the potential, and lean really is, a lot of people don't get what lean is deeply, but lean, if you look at it really deeply, it is the way to have it all. It really is. It's a way to have high profit if you're a profit company. It's a way to have high engagement. It's a way to have an incredibly safe work environment. It's a way to have incredibly loyal customers. It's a way to capture market share. I mean, you really can have it all if you're willing to do the hard work to get there. So let's keep going and talk a little more about engagement. How do we get more Terrys? We need more Terrys in the world. So this is from Gallup again. This is a stacked bar chart that shows what they have found to be the comparison of engagement and financial performance. And so what you'll notice is in the world-class companies, and they define performance, again, purely financial in this case, 67% of the workers in those companies are actively engaged, whereas in the average company, we know 30 to 33% are engaged. And only 7% are actively disengaged. Remember, those are the ones that are actually acting out. They're acting out their frustration. 18%, so almost 20% in the average company are acting out their unhappiness. So from a financial perspective, this engagement thing makes a lot of sense. And it also, from a humanistic perspective, and bringing humanity back into the workplace, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. So how do we go about this? Again, we turn back to the lean practices and tools. They actually have in them the foundation for great levels, deep levels of employee engagement if we do them properly. So let's take a look. What I found was that, so here, let me back up for a second. I'm not a trained psychologist, I'm not a degreed psychologist, but I love psychology. I read a lot, I observe a lot, and I do odd things like I'll read books on how people select jurors for trials. I'll read books on body language, those kinds of things to really study people. And so when I started looking at engagement in my own client base and then looked at the literature, what I discovered was that there are these fundamental human nature elements that make someone either engage or not. And if you set the conditions for engagement, they will engage. So we can't go like, oh, why isn't he engaging? It's not about him, it's about the environment that will invite engagement versus discouraging engagement. So I found that there were 3 C's, as I call it, that are the requirements for setting those conditions for engagement. The first one is connection. Basic human need. We all need to connect. There are people that like to be a little more private and people that like to be a little more social, but every single person, except for that rare sociopath again, like to connect and need to connect. So what do we do in business? We make it absolutely impossible to connect much of the time. This is self-inflicted chaos. We do everything in our power to create situations where people cannot connect and cannot connect well. So this means they have to be connected to the company's purpose and vision. They have to have some emotional connection to that. So, this is another thing that, my beginning business days were in the 80s, and I think it was pretty global in the 80s. You didn't talk about feelings. Not at work. And you may not talk about them right now. In many circles, feelings are not part of the equation. But feelings matter. We are human beings with emotions, and emotions matter. And connecting is one of those needs that we've got. Oops, I'm sorry. And then connecting to the customer, we talked about in the beginning, to be able to come into an organization already understanding who the customer is, what the customer values and needs, what problem the company is solving, and how that person connects to that customer is brilliant. It's a brilliant way to connect people. So when they come in, what do you guys call it again? Initiation? Is that your word? Introduction. So when their introduction into the company, if they're able to get that understanding, that's great. But what happens, at least in the U.S., is that they come in, they learn about their benefits, their health care, how they're gonna get paid, all that stuff, and they don't ever really learn these fundamental things that they need in order to be engaged. So, connection. This is, again, a provocative statement, but I believe that if the company said to you, each one of you, all right, you've got a year to work on one process, and you can only work on one process to make our performance better, what would most people choose? Before you saw the slide, forget the slide for a second. What would you choose? What, sales? Okay, all right. Ching, bring in the money. or something customer facing, right? I disagree. I think the very most important process to nail, to get it really, really well done is, I call it onboarding, you call it initiation, introduction. That is the most important process, because you had that person at you're hired. Did you see Jerry Maguire, the movie? You had me at hello. You had them at you're hired. They are never more engaged than they are when they get those words, you're hired. They're never more engaged than they are on day one when they walk through those doors. And every single person, except for that rare sociopath, walk in through that door with hope. They hope that they have a better boss. They hope that they're with a better company. They hope that they'll be there longer. They hope. They're filled with hope. It's Psych 101. You grab that hope and you run with it. It's leveraging, and so what we do is they walk in the door, and in many companies, that hope is dashed the first 5 minutes. Why is it dashed? Because they don't have what they need, they don't get the information they need, they're not connected to anything in the company, and it's just a disaster. So this is why I think that new hire introduction is the absolute best place to put your effort quickly. It's urgent. And so this is a client of mine where they gave a survey to hiring managers and people that had been only with the company for up to 6 months prior to the survey. And 44% of them, before we did any improvement, said that they always or sometimes got what they needed. This is both, again, the manager's perspective and the new hire's perspective. And 23% of the people said they rarely or never got what they needed. So we lumped them into categories. So 23%, basically a quarter of the people coming into the company didn't get what they needed to be successful on day one. After improvement, very targeted improvement, asked the survey again, and now we're up to 63% of saying always or sometimes they get what they need. And we're down 14% on the rarely never. This is about a 6-month period. So it was pretty significant to see those numbers in 6 months, and they're still at it. This is 2 years later. They're still at it, and they're getting higher and higher numbers. So what do they need? On the first day, every single person needs general information, the typical stuff, and most people get it. They also need very job-specific orientation. And Gore is one of those companies like Toyota that gives their employees 6 weeks of orientation or introduction. And that 6 weeks is not a whole lot of job-specific. There's a little bit of job-specific, but it's really learning the culture, learning how they behave, learning what the values and norms are of the organization, taking their time to make sure that person is getting their DNA to marry up with the company's DNA. So they're taking their time. And then most importantly is people need tools. So here's one. You guys all have business cards, right? Little business cards with your name and your title, all right? So I have 80% of my clients, when we get into this area, I say, when do people get their business cards? 2 weeks after they start, 4 weeks after they start. Why? Well, because they may not show up. So we don't want to get them business cards if they don't show up. Okay, what percentage of your people get a job from you and don't show up? And by the way, what's that about if they don't show up after you've given them a job offer? And oh, by the way, you can get little sheets of business card paper you can put in your printer and give them 20 cards on day one if you're afraid that they're not going to show up. There's all kinds of ways around this. But what an act of disrespect to have someone walk into an organization, have in some cases, no desk, no phone, something, but no business cards, nothing that they can go as they're meeting new people. They don't even have a way to say, here's my extension, here's my email. It's like, what are we doing? What are we doing to ourselves? Self-inflicted chaos. So these are all the things that people need at least the first week, in addition to learning about their health benefits and those kinds of things. Actually, they probably don't have a lot of health benefit orientation here, right? Because you're socialized, right? Social health care, or no? Okay, never mind. Never mind. I'll get information later. Might have opened a can of worms there. Okay, so here's another thing. In an airport or in a shopping mall, there's a big map and it says, you are here. This is fundamental for people to understand where they sit in the organization. Not the org chart, although that helps, but this is like, here's our value stream. This is where you are. This is how you're going to connect to our customers. This is a fundamental piece of information that can really change someone's first experience when they come on to a new company. And it's important for them to understand that connection. All right, I'm going to go quickly because we're running out of time. Control. Do you like the idea of all the employees getting control? I bet some of you don't. I bet your leaders don't. But here's the thing. We're not talking about anarchy. We're not talking about, like, we give them control and they're going to, like, change everything and they're going to go out of control. That's not what we're talking about. It's freedom with boundaries. So leaders still set strategy, leaders still set boundaries, and then you let them go and let them do what they need to do within those boundaries. Everyone needs control. But what leaders often do is they tell people what they need to do, strategy, and then they tell them how they're going to do it, tactics. Not cool. You can tell people what, you can tell them how, you can't tell them both. So what we have to do is give people control where they have heavy involvement in the decisions that affect their daily lives. So this isn't like, I'm going to take off for 2 hours and I want my desk over there. And it's not stuff like that. It's process design. It's what's the best way to get this job done to deliver high quality to the customer. Because remember, everyone comes into work wanting to serve, except for that rare sociopath. So they want to serve. They want to do well, and yet we mandate how they're going to work down to the little nitty-gritty details to where they're not using their brains. Which leads me to the third one. Creativity. So everyone has a need, a human need. It's Psychology 101. They have a human need to be creative. And what we do much of the time is have employees come in, and then we tell them what to do, we tell them how to do it, and we don't give them any opportunity to make improvement. What are we doing? We've met the enemy, and it is us. So what we have to do is turn this around and get the employees very deeply engaged in making improvement on their own within boundaries that leaders define. So I'm going to go back for a second. So this chart shows you how you can do this. You have senior leadership saying what has to happen. Cookies. Strategy deployment and value stream mapping are leadership activities. They are strategic setting activities that leaders should be doing. The front line should not be doing that. That's strategy. Once that strategy is set, then it comes down to the frontline workers through rapid improvement events, daily Kaizen, projects, etc. And they're heavily engaged in creating, having control, and connecting with each other in a very positive way. That's how we get engagement in an organization. So the Gallup Q12 poll, as it's called, question 12, which stands for 12 questions. One of the questions they do not ask, which makes me question the Gallup findings, is to what degree are you actively engaged in defining the processes that you're responsible for? That is the question of the day, and that is what gets engagement, is giving people that level of control. So the last thing I'll say is that creativity, it goes really hand in hand with problem solving, and problem solving is a high. There is nothing more thrilling than, yes, we nailed it. We got it done. We fixed it. And there's nothing more demoralizing and disengaging than, here's that darn problem again. It's like, it won't go away. Make it go away. And so this is, problem solving is, again, the key, is getting everyone highly trained and capable of doing problem solving. This is the way to engage people. So this is 4 different slides that show a rapid improvement event where people are sequestered, a cross-functional team of up to 10 people for 2 to 5 days, very defined objectives, very defined, the why has already been defined, the root cause has not been defined, but the problem has been defined. They get together, they go through the PDSA cycle, and they come out at the end with not a plan for improvement, they've actually implemented improvement in the 2 to 5 days. So scope's narrow, so that you can get it done, but it's actual improvement. You can't get addicted to these things. You have to use other means of daily improvement and projects. But this is a great way to get people together and connecting with each other and creating and solving problems. And by the way, this is a physician. So the teams that I work with, if it's in healthcare, if it requires a physician to be present, that physician's in that room for 2 to 5 days. So it's everyone that's involved is in the room. And this is what you get. You get people like Fred, who was on one of my teams in Bakersfield, California, oil and gas, a rapid improvement event, who said that at the end of that event, he went home and told his family it was one of the best working days, 3 days, that he had had. And it was because he was able to create. He was able to get control over the work that he was responsible for because he was designing how it would be done. And he was able to connect with all the people that are upstream and downstream from where he sits in a very powerful way. And this is, what we need a lot more of. And it's really pretty easy to get. I mean, it's not all that difficult to get this kind of result over and over and over. So those are the 3 C's. If you want engagement, you've got to set those conditions for engagement. And you do that by those 3 C's and getting everyone actively engaged on a regular basis of designing their own processes once strategy is set. So I'm going to skip this for right now, and we're going to go to Q&A. But just quickly, before we do this, this is my definition, which is on your handout, of an outstanding organization. And there's a lot to. It's not just, we're profitable. There's a lot more to it than that. But I want you to take a good look at this, and this may actually spawn some questions during this Q&A period. There's the well-priced products, so we didn't go into product development. We're not going to. But this assumes that you've got products that people want, and they're priced well. So strategically, that has to be in place. And then you've got to be able to exceed, preferably, your customer requirements so that you build market share and get loyal customers. And then deliver value where you've got no unnecessary expenses. So this means getting rid of all the wasteful activities that you do. You're organized so that work flows without delay, meaning that structurally, work flows to the right people at the right time and they're available to do the work. They're not multitasking. And you're compliant with all laws. That goes without saying. No breaking laws. And that you have these creative, fulfilling work environments where everyone's able to reach his or her full potential. That is an outstanding organization. So you can't solve world hunger in one day. You need to put a plan in place for where you want to go, where some of the pain points are in your organization. I do have a self-assessment you can use organizationally on my website for the book. On the book page, there's a download that allows you to ask questions internally to figure out, where do we need more help? Are we needing more help with getting greater clarity, or do we have that pretty good and we need more focus work? Do we need more discipline work? And it just will allow you to kind of focus and prioritize on where you want to make some change. But here's the bottom line. People often think that it is what it is, business is just crazy. It's not. It doesn't have to be. There's self-inflicted chaos that you can do a lot about, and you can do it wherever you sit in the organization by getting these 4 things in place. So start tomorrow. No, you're here tomorrow. Start, Thursday? Start Thursday. Something little, anything. Start. Don't wait. Start. Anything to move that needle toward outstandingness. That's my word. That's not a word, Outstandingness is my made-up word. Okay, so one more thing I'll say is I do offer monthly webinars. Who's the gentleman that goes to the webinars? Who is that comes to the oh, yes, sir. So he's been attending the webinars. You can also, they're all recorded, so you don't have to stay up late. What is it, 8 o'clock your time? 8 p.m. So you don't have to stay up late. You can actually just listen to the recordings, all different subjects. Strategy deployment, PDSA, Kaizen events. There's all kinds of stuff there. And then I also have a newsletter and a blog. I don't blog much because I'm too busy. But I do have a newsletter that's pretty newsy every month with actual content. It's not just a sales newsletter. It's content. So, and then first 2 books are over here, and the new one's here, and then you have that one. So I'm open to your questions. I'm here to serve.
I can start off then.
Okay.
One thing I find really, really important is telling the truth to be able to create clarity. But telling the truth is also sometimes being the bad guy or being negative or ratting on your friends. So, how do you foster that behavior when it can feel so bad to do it?
Yeah, telling the truth is tricky. So in team events, I have what I call, kind of the rules of engagement. And one of the rules is, it is what it is. And so we start off with this understanding that telling the truth is necessary to get us to an improved state, and that there will be no blame, and if there is even a smack of blame, I'll just shut it down, because it's not about what people do, it's about systems and processes. So there's no blame. And then it's really a matter of, I know it may be difficult, but we have to know the truth. And then, so when we go out and we go to the Gemba or go and see where the work is done, the people that are giving us information are also taught that they also have to tell the truth, and it's safe to do so. And I have had one or two clients where we told them that, and then afterwards some leader went in and smacked them for doing that, and then I had to go marching to the leader's office and say, no, you don't do that. That's breaking the rules. But most of the time, I get leaders in that right mindset to allow that to happen beforehand. So I do a lot of leadership coaching up front, and then during the activity, then just make sure I keep reinforcing, we have to know the truth, we have to know the truth. And, it's just, every team's a little different, but that prep up front for leadership really helps. It gets them trusting a little more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm interested in how you see the responsible for continuous improvement for process owner versus functional managers.
So the process owners would be functional managers.
Okay, but if the process owner, the process is so
cross-functional.
Cross-functional.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. No, that's why it's hard, because if the org chart, if the functional leader, so I'll give you my financial services area. So Audrey is the name of the process owner. She's responsible for what's called a correspondence unit. They write letters to people that are investing in this organization. And that's all she's got. But the process is all the way from sales, going out and selling the services, all the way through to the customers asking for information, and then through to the broker. I don't know if you guys have this model, but there's a third party that sells these investments. So there's a lot of people in the company that are responsible for that process. Well, Audrey is a functional manager, and she volunteered to be the first process owner ever in this company. And so the leadership team agreed to it, and they sent out, an announcement. Audrey's the process owner. This is what it means. She's going to have all the responsibility for the process, not the people, except for her own, but the process. And this is all about making the process work well. And they were actually lowest in the industry for their performance. So there was a high need to get it up and get their performance up. And so everyone just started recognizing her. She really only had one problem where she tried to get a team together, and the other functional manager said, no, you're not taking my people. And then she had to escalate it up one level to her boss, and her boss talked to that boss, and then they were able to get everyone. And so it took a couple of little bumps for people to recognize it doesn't matter about the org chart. It matters that she has that authority to manage that process. So now, a little bit, ideally, you actually start managing and functionally on the org chart, start going across processes. But most of my clients aren't ready for that yet, so we just say, it's like W.L. Gore with no bosses. Doesn't matter. As long as that person's recognized and has a skill set, she actually does a fabulous job. Good question. So does anyone have a question? This is what I was thinking you might have, about how you currently view engagement in your organization. Because I know you're having a talk tomorrow, right, on engagement. And today, this morning, was also engagement, right? But tomorrow there's another one, a company. Who's the company that's talking about engagement tomorrow?
Several, actually.
Okay.
We're going to talk about creating engagement by top management commitment, and
so engaging with top leaders.
And we're also going to talk. We're going to have this talk from ICA, where we'll talk about how to create an engagement around continuous improvement.
Yeah, so the thing about the top leaders that's interesting is if you do strategy deployment, that requires top leaders to be involved in that. If you're going to do it at an organization-wide level, they're required to be involved with that. And then because they've committed to that plan, then they have a vested interest. They want to make sure that all the improvement that's being done is supporting their plan because they're responsible for the results at that high level. So that helps keep leadership engaged. And then the other thing I was going to say is on value stream mapping teams, I'm working with a brand new client right now, and when I said that the team needed to be vice presidents and above, they were like, no, mapping, the little people do mapping. The front lines do mapping. I go, not this kind of mapping, they don't. This is strategic. So I need you guys for 2 to 3 days, and they're like, no, you can't have us for 2 to 3 days. I'm like, well, then we're not value stream mapping. It's a strategic activity. And so they did it. And what happens with value stream mapping, for those of you who haven't tried it, is at the end of day one, when you get the current state done, every single leader, without exception on that team goes, wow, I had no idea this is how we operate. And now I understand why we have difficulty with our customers and things like that. So it's really powerful to force that and to force those leaders to be on a team, to do the strategic work. And then once they set the future state, then they can't, go, well, I'm going to go over here or I'm going to go over there. They're all committed. So that's another way to get leaders engaged, is to get them involved with value stream mapping.
Great. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
You have been a great guru today.
Thank you.
To show our appreciation, we're going to give you the gift of giving. Giving something for children in need in the world. And you get to choose from a school pack.
Oh, this is going to be so hard.
It's going to be hard, I know. Footballs.
Soccer.
Liquid, actually I don't know the English word, but
nutrition, something nutritional?
Yeah, or actually liquid. Yeah.
Okay, and what's the other one?
And this is vaccine.
Vaccine. Oh, yeah. Nutrition. I take nutrition.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wait, I want to say something. Tack så mycket. Thank you.
Thank you.
I asked that with a question mark. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you did.
Thank you. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and excuse me, I'm going to switch into Swedish now.
Okay, go ahead.
Great.
Absolutely.
Imorgon har vi en till väldigt spännande dag och se fram emot. Då kommer vi få höra Katalin Paldiak från Clarion Hotel. Hon har utsetts till en av Nordens mäktigaste kvinnor. Hon kommer berätta just om vikten av högsta ledningsengagemang för att skapa driv i förbättringsarbetet. Vi ska få höra Maria Beijbom, kvalitetsdirektör på ABB, berätta om hur de använder revisioner och utvärderingar som ett jätteviktigt verktyg för att driva kvalitetsförbättringsarbetet framåt. Vi ska få lyssna till Lotta Persson från ICA, berätta hur man på ICA med konceptet ledande logistik jobbar för att skapa ett engagemang i hela verksamheten för att jobba mot perfektion. Sen ska vi få lyssna till Sara Lodin från Tälje som pratar om vikten av att arbeta aktivt med medarbetarskap och ledarskap för att skapa engagemang i förbättringsarbetet. Och sist men inte minst kommer Niklas Mårdfält och berättar om hur du blir framtidens vinnare. Bara en sån sak. Jag har haft en jättebra dag idag. Väldigt lärorikt har det varit för mig. Och jag hoppas att ni håller med mig om att det har varit en väldigt tydlig röd tråd genom den här dagen. Det har varit återkommande teman som jag har sett. Max, det är nästan som att någon har planerat det här. Helt otroligt. Vi började dagen med att prata om hur vi skapar engagemang för att åstadkomma resultat som skapar engagemang och hur vi därigenom blir uthålliga. Sen så fick vi höra till Coca-Cola, Anna Greis berätta om hur de väldigt konkret och systematiskt jobbar med uppföljning, någonting som hon älskade att göra, för att skapa driv på alla nivåer i verksamheten. En oerhört tydlig röd tråd även där. Och så har vi nu på eftermiddagen fått lära oss hur vi väldigt konkret jobbar med att skapa clarity, fokus och disciplin som ger engagemang. Och får vi det på plats, då kan vi skapa en helt outstanding organisation. Tack så jättemycket för ert engagemang idag. Det har varit fantastiskt att få ta del av alla era reflektioner. Imorgon har vi en till, hoppas jag, minst lika bra dag. Tack ska ni ha.